We're recording. All righty.
Okay, so we're on the line with Tamorra Boyd, one of my friends and small business attorney, also has her MBA. So you are in the right place. If you're trying to start your business and you have questions, my friends, we did a webinar a few weeks ago about how to protect your license and how to protect your assets. And we got quite a response from that. And she did some consultations with people, and there were some questions that kept coming up between then and now. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for you all to come in. We're going to answer some of those questions that she kept getting over and over again so that we can get those out of the way. And if you come up with any specific questions or challenges that you have for your business, there'll be an opportunity to answer those in the end. So I apologize for anybody that has been waiting. We have been having some major tech issues that we did not have before. So such is life, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I tried a bunch of them. So this is what we're going to go with. I do. So Tamorra, if you want to just go back for a second for anybody that was not at the original webinar and just tell them a little bit about yourself, your background.
Surely, again, thank you so much for having me on. I am Tamorra Boyd. I graduated from Florida A&M University with my BS and my MBA. With
Go Rattlers!
Yes, Rattlers, strike it again. BS and MBA with concentration in management and marketing. I went out and actually worked in healthcare for a little while on the business development and marketing side for pharmaceutical company, medical device companies, and then decided I wanted to go to law school. I originally planned to be marketing counsel for a pharmaceutical company. And then I got out in 2013 and the market was trash. And I said, it would be a great opportunity for me to start helping small business owners. So that's pretty much what I've been doing since. Graduated from Mercer University, go Bears, and with my JD, and have been kind of working on my own ever since. I have my own practice, Boyd Legal Counsel, and my goal is to help small businesses, not make the mistakes that a lot of small businesses make. Small businesses, entrepreneurship is growing, particularly among women, but I find a lot of times we just generally don't know exactly where to start, or we just kind of start and we don't give ourselves the proper legal footing to protect ourselves. And then, you get frustrated because now you've encountered something, you're not sure what to do. And that can be a really big roadblock in getting things done. So I'm happy to be here, happy to answer you guys' questions. Fire away. Ready to go.
Well, I'll just say one of the first questions that we were talking about that you get a lot or you were getting a lot in the consultations were what type of entity should someone set up? So could you kind of dig into that a little bit more and give the audience a bit more clarification about the different types?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about entity creation, we're talking about limited liability companies, which is an LLC, limited liability partnerships, which is LLP. We're talking about corporation. There is a C Corp and an S Corp, which some people have heard these terms before. And these are things that will stand alone. You can't always be a sole proprietorship. That is, I am operating as my business. Me and my business are the same. We're together. Creating an entity means my business is going to stand alone. It's going to have its own social security number, so to speak, which is an EIN. and it is going to be a separate entity from me. I always recommend that you create a separate entity when you're doing any kind of consumer facing service, because we all know the world is very litigious. And if someone decides that they're not happy or something of that nature and they want to sue you, you want them to sue the business. You don't want them to sue you, because if they sue you and they win, then that means you personally are on the hook for whatever award that they get. So, separating those gives you a little bit of, it's like separation of church and state here. Gives you a little bit of room to do things. And that also helps you, with building business credit and all of that. LLC is the easiest entity to go with when you first begin, because it is what's known for tax purposes. It's what's known as a pass-through entity, meaning that whatever you're earning in the LLC passes through directly to you as the individual. So even though you are separated, come tax time, you will file one additional sheet that's called a Schedule C with your personal 1040 taxes, and that's all. That's all you have to do as far as Uncle Sam is concerned. You get the protection of having that separate entity away from your own personal assets, but you don't have to do a whole lot of extra paperwork.
Okay, cool.
Some people also have heard, and they may have been told by their accountant, that they can set up an S Corp. Now, an S Corp is also a pass-through entity for tax purposes. However, you have the additional paperwork of a corporation. Corporations require governance documents, corporate minutes, meetings, and there are very specific requirements if you're going to incorporate a corporation. And those are a little bit cumbersome, especially when you're first starting out. And the tax benefits for an S Corp are not so much that it warrants the additional paperwork, at least when you first start out. If you are an entity that's going to be making $50,000 in revenue or less when you first start out, then the benefits of having an S Corp are just really not going to be there for you. It's just additional paperwork that you're going to have to do. So I always recommend that you have a LLC to start. And then once you scale up, you start to grow, you can convert from an LLC to an S Corp when it makes good financial sense to do so.
Okay. I've heard of also a PLLC. What is the difference from a PLLC and a regular LLC?
A PLLC is just a professional limited liability company. That designation is generally used with different types of professionals, think lawyers, law firms, doctors' offices. Some states have the requirement that if you are incorporating as an organization of professionals like a lawyer, accountants, things like that, then you have to have the PLLC designation, but that's something that's state specific. It's not a requirement everywhere. So that will be something that you would want to look into with your particular jurisdiction.
Okay. And so what's the difference between a sole proprietorship and a DBA?
All right, so DBA stands for doing business as, and that is essentially like an alias, okay? So when you're talking about a DBA, you can be doing business as yourself as a sole proprietor, where you are, say you are Tavana Denise, doing business as Wellness PT Society. So you don't have a separate EIN, you don't have anything separate, you are yourself, but you're doing business as Wellness PTs. Or you could do Wellness PTs LLC, doing business as Wellness PT Society, where this entity has its own social security number and it just has an alias. So that's essentially what a DBA is. Now, in different jurisdictions have different rules governing DBAs. For instance, here in Georgia, if you are yourself a personal person, sole proprietorship, and you want to use a business name, you absolutely have to file a DBA in order to do that. Otherwise, you're running afoul of the corporations law here, because the idea is that they don't want people posing as corporations when it's just the one person. If you're going to use a different name, they don't want it to be a situation where you're a corporation that does this. It's sort of like you're Pepsi doing business as Coke. That would be a horrible, horrible thing in the state of Georgia. They would murder you immediately. So they want to, they need to know who you are. You have to file the documentation to prove who you are.
So just to clarify, if I'm a sole proprietorship, I cannot take on the alias, the name of a corporation, I have to file paperwork that says the DBA, or I have to file a LLC, like I have to create a corporation?
You don't have to, you have to create a DBA if you are an individual doing business. You do not have to create an LLC in order to do business. It's recommended, but you don't have to.
Okay. There was another question I thought, okay, we had one question came through about, it says, once I set up a LLC, I have to do liability insurance as a business versus individual, which really increases the rates. Is that correct?
Right. So the increase in rate, any changes in how much it's going to cost is going to depend on the individual insurance companies. But the difference is that you are now doing, you're now insuring the company, which means that if you have an LLC, that means anyone that works for you, whether you hire employees or if you have contractors, they also may be covered by your liability insurance, which is why there may be an increase in rate. In the end, it will be worth it because it gives you the opportunity to scale faster. So you might pay a little bit more up out of pocket, but at the same time, you'll have the ability to protect. And not only that, you're protecting, like I said, the entire business. You're also, because you're a separate entity from the business, any issues that you have where liability insurance would come into play are on the business and not on you personally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So those are the questions that I have. Was there any other questions that came up quite often when you were doing the individual consultations from the previous webinar that we had?
Mostly people just, clarifying and understanding that the differences or what you can do as far as protecting yourself as a physical therapist in your physical therapy license. We have a lot of people that are doing a variety of things, some things within the physical therapy and wellness space, and some things not. And understanding what you have, what you're doing will not affect your license if you're doing something completely different. You don't have to put your license on the line, so to speak, if you're doing something completely unrelated to physical therapy. That was one of the things I kind of had to, continue to reiterate. You can create a separate entity and your license doesn't have to have any part whatsoever to play with the creation of a separate entity in a new business. It's
when you say not doing anything related to physical therapy, do you have, without giving names, of course, do you have examples of those situations where you had to continue to reiterate the separation and where it's okay and you're not going to be putting your license on the line?
Sure, absolutely. So we have kind of varying scenarios. We have scenario one where somebody is a physical therapist, but they want to open a bake shop. They can open their bake shop and their license is nowhere involved in that. They're not doing any physical therapy. They're not, giving anybody any advice as a physical therapist. So absolutely, no need. Same token, I was a physical therapist and now I'm a business coach. I had my own physical therapy business for many, many years. And I want to, give people the opportunity to benefit from my understanding of running a business. Again, as a physical therapist, you're not advising anyone in that capacity. So you can create a separate entity and your physical therapy license is nowhere involved. Mm-hmm. If you say want to start a physical therapy company, there, you might find yourself in giving someone advice as a physical therapist. And there we discuss, if you're going to go that route, then you absolutely want to have some retainers and waivers in place that people understand the relationship. They understand that you're relying on your expertise as a physical therapist and what that entails. I do see we have a question.
Mm-hmm. You want to read?
Says a DBA would not protect your personal assets like an LLC, correct? So again, it depends on what the underlying entity of the DBA is. So if you are a sole proprietor doing business as some sort of company name, then you're right. Your assets are not protected. If they sue that company name, if Savannah Denise is doing business as Wellness PT Society and she has no underlying entity, is just her. Someone sues Wellness PT Society, they're suing Savannah Denise, period. There's nothing in between. If you have an LLC and you decide that you want to Some people decide that they're, going to change directions or what have you with their business. So you now have an LLC, and you want to, instead of incorporating yet another LLC, you want to just do business as another name. So you can keep the underlying entity that's already established and do business as another name. In that case, your LLC protects your personal assets because it's already in place. It's sort of like a blocker. I hope that answers your question, Kate.
Okay. And while we're getting an affirmative from her, we got another question that came through. Two questions, it looks like. What products can you sell under your business before getting into the area in which it's not related? For example, a PT, wellness, health that sells, I guess, business that sells products including music, books, fitness items, clothing, etc., that is related to the business.
Okay, that's a great question. So when we talk about related to the business, there is, with regards to physical therapy specifically, because that is an area where you have to be licensed to be a physical therapist, right? That license is because you have the skills and training to instruct people on how to move their bodies and how to, improve their range of motion, things that are having to do with their physical person, right? When you're talking about services and things and equipment and things that you're selling as a PT that are going to be related to your PT business, you're talking about, say, maybe you're talking about services for starters. So you're talking about, sessions with you as a physical therapist. That's a service that you're selling that would absolutely be related to your license. Perhaps maybe Products is a little bit more tricky because I would assume that, you as a physical therapist probably wouldn't be offering anything unless it's been signed off on maybe a doctor. I'm not sure if there's anything. You guys don't prescribe medicines or anything like that. So
no, but we do sometimes give, we might give splints, or we might give something we call TheraBand, the stretch bands, or pieces of equipment, hot packs, cold packs.
Right. So those types of items that are specifically related to the treatment of a person for a particular ailment, those are the type of products that, you as a PT are offering in that capacity. When you get into things that are, I'm a physical therapist and, since I'm moving my body, I have a line of yoga pants. Yoga pants are not necessarily related to PT. Like, you don't have to be a PT in order to sell yoga pants, and you don't have to sell yoga pants as a PT, if that makes sense. The items that we named previously are directly related to your treatment of the person and their ailment that you're helping them with as a physical therapist. Yoga pants are not related. So in that vein, if you are talking about merchandise and things like that, books on, general information books on physical therapy or, how to move the body would probably be covered or would be something that you would have to worry about as related to PT, unless it's a situation where, say, for instance, you wrote the book and you're relying on your expertise as a physical therapist, in your, in the things that you put in the book, and now you're selling the book to your physical therapy clients. That's a place where your license is on the line for that, because the information you're providing is directly correlating to your knowledge as a physical therapist. But if you just sold, for instance, if you sold books that you didn't write, that are about physical therapy, or if you sold books that were about body movement, someone, say you're a physical therapist, but you sell books that talk about yoga and Pilates. Those are just, regular items. Those are not related to your physical therapy license, and you would be able to sell those just as a person in a business.
So if a person, let's say, for example, since you mentioned the writing the books that came from you, selling a book that came from somebody else, okay, but selling a book that came from you, not necessarily okay. But would it be okay if that person is a physical therapist and they wrote a yoga Pilates book? Could they sell that?
Right. So if they're a physical therapist and they wrote a yoga and Pilates book and they're just saying, and let me back up a little bit. It's not so much that it's not okay for you to do these things as a physical therapist. It's just that you have to take the additional step of protecting your license while doing those things. So if you write a book on physical therapy and as a physical therapist, and you're saying this is knowledge that I know of as a physical therapy or as a physical therapist, you want to take the additional step of putting, you know, a note in the beginning of the book, or
Right.
you can sell it to say, you know, this is me and my knowledge as a physical therapist. If you have these specific issues, you should see a doctor.
Right. So that's essentially the disclaimer that you've been talking about. Like,
Right.
let people be clear and understand. If you're coming more from the prevention, wellness side of things, you need to just put that disclaimer in there. Let's just make it easy and blanket. Put the disclaimer in there. As long as it's not physical therapy, rehab, treatment, intervention for something that has broken or gone wrong, put the disclaimer in there. It looks like, because the follow-up question from the same person, I'm selling books that I wrote that are more on the wellness side, for example. Now, this seems really way off too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Tamorra. A devotional for athletes. To me, that's almost the same example that you gave for yoga. Like, anybody can, like, you don't need a license to sell yoga pants and yoga blocks. You don't need a license to do a devotional.
Exactly.
Right. So that, I think, those are the differences.
Right. You're not offering a specific medical advice, medical treatment. You're not offering anything that is specific to anybody. And got another question. And your expert, you're not relying on your expertise as a physical therapist for that particular book. So you're in the clear with that.
Right. And there was another question. Other than the state website, what other sites should you search for a business name? I'm wondering, are they getting into more trademark and all of that stuff, as opposed to just choosing your entity name? So other than state website, what other site should you search for a business name?
I would recommend that you go to your the website for your county. And every state does this slightly different. Every state has a Secretary of State's office, and most times I think I've only encountered once or twice where the Secretary of State doesn't handle new business creation. But so you can start there to make sure you're essentially trying to just make sure that there is no other business with the name that you want to use, because you don't want to create a confusing situation. Here in Georgia in particular, they won't allow you to register the name if it's the exact same. But when I say it can be literally one letter off or a punctuation and it will go through, it can create a problem. I've actually had that happen to a potential client. They came to me and they were like, I'm getting these cease and desist letters about using this name. And I'm like, we had this name for however many years, but I'm like, I'm looking on the website and that other company has had their name for much longer. And now you're in a situation where it's a tricky wicket. You don't want to get into that scenario. So I would check your state's website. Also check the county website. If you create a business entity, at least particularly in Georgia, I can speak to this for sure, and any other jurisdiction, I would just have to go check their corporations law. Here in Georgia, if you incorporate an actual business and there is someone doing business as a DBA, you can file to request that the DBA be canceled. It can create a little bit of a sticky wicket depending on how long that person has been using the DBA. Because there is, at this particular moment, because Georgia is so vast and every county has their own system for recording DBAs, there's no connection between the state system and the county system. So the state system supersedes. It's essentially kind of like the law. Federal law overrides any state law, overrides any county law, so on and so forth. So you file for the LLC at the state level. You can check, you can see if, for instance, if you live in Fulton County and you file for an LLC with the state of Georgia, if you check Fulton County and there's a DBA, with the name that you want, you can file to have that DBA canceled. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not opening yourself up to potential liability from the owner of that DBA, because they may say, I've been doing business under this name for 20 years and I'm going to lose, clients. There's goodwill. There's all kinds of things kind of wrapped up in that name, and they may sue you civilly for it. So, you have to consider that if there's just a name that you're dying to have. But you would have, I guess, the superseding name at the state level over the county level.
Interesting. We got another question here. Anything else I need besides a disclaimer on the website and the client contract?
That should give you sufficient coverage. The idea is to put yourself in a position to prevent issues. I find that the more communication you have with your clients up front to prevent any misunderstanding, the better. And not to mention, if you have things, particularly things in writing that they have signed, so in the event of a client contract, as long as they read it, which they should, which anything you sign, you should absolutely read, will give you that kind of protection. Should they later come and say they didn't understand or didn't know, you can say, I have this piece of paper that says you did know, you signed it. See, date, and that gives you that protection that you're looking for.
And is there any clarification that you want to ask regarding that? Because I think a lot of people, the biggest challenge, especially for physical therapists, movement specialists, and people like that want to go into the wellness prevention side, is some of what we do seems like it looks very similar to personal training or wellness coaching or whatever. So is there any advice or any way that you can kind of explain it to help people understand, like, this is physical therapy? Obviously, if you're doing anything that you were hired for as an employee for physical therapy, that's one thing. But how do they clear their mind and have close enough to black and white separation between anything that they were hired as an employee to do a job as a physical therapist and anything else that they might want to do in the future, so they can just go ahead and do it and not freak out?
Black and white is real difficult sometimes. I think what you're asking is how to protect yourself with your business doing anything that's not necessarily PT. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because there's so many different, it's like if somebody was just a waitress and she decides that she wants to be a yoga teacher, a health coach, write books on any subject under the sun, she just goes off and does it, no problem. The healthcare community, in particular, the physical therapists, are struggling quite a bit in figuring out, okay, what is what? Like, where is, like, the waitress could go do anything. Where is the line? And if there is a line, how do we protect ourselves, and I think that's what that last question is about. Like, what are the things that we need to put into place so that we can maintain our license, even if we don't use it to practice physical therapy ever again, but we want to still be in the wellness and prevention space?
I think, and with regards to that, it's a little bit more clear. Any agreement or any disclaimer that you put up on your website, anything that you have your client sign, needs to definitively state that you're not treating them as their physical therapist, that they are accepting responsibility for any, if you're into a business that there's body movement, that they're accepting liability for any movements that they may make, and that they will consult a physician should they feel they need additional assistance. But the clear thing is to make it understood that you're not treating them, that the information you're offering is for general purposes. That's kind of a broad term to say, hey, I'm just giving you this information. This is, things that, could be used for this, but I'm not treating you specifically for any particular ailment. And this is just information that I'm offering you from the perspective of somebody who has the understanding of how the body works. It's about keeping it as clear cut and general as possible, and not specific, and making it clear that you're not treating them. I think that's the biggest thing for anybody moving into any physical therapist moving into a wellness space or any space where they're not necessarily using their license in their business.
Gotcha. I think that ought to do it. Let's see. Did anything else come through? One more place just to make sure. Okay, I do not see any other questions. So I want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom, all of that great stuff. We will put, can you tell them how to get in touch with you should they want to work with you specifically?
Absolutely. You can visit my website. It is www.blcounsel.com. I'm also on Facebook at Boyd Legal Counsel LLC, so you can just search me there. I always have it available. You can set up consultations with me. Any fees you pay for consultation do go towards your fees to retain me. So everybody, you do get your money's worth. It's not a situation where you're just paying to talk to a lawyer and you don't get anything at the end of the day. So be happy to help you guys out. Look forward to speaking to folks.
All right. Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Hey.